Welcome back. Well, South Africans are increasingly turning to gambling as a way of making ends meet. For many low-income earners, gambling is no longer just a form of entertainment. It's become a desperate means to cope with mounting debt or to cover daily expenses. Every year, South Africans wager a staggering 1 trillion rand, with over 700 billion spent on sports betting alone. Gambling, as we know, can spiral into an addiction, often leading to financial strain and emotional distress for loved ones. Let's discuss the story further. We're joined now by Tumelo Mokoena. She's with the South African Responsible Gambling Foundation. Tumelo, thanks very much for joining us this afternoon. What an incredibly important topic in the current economic climate, and particularly because gambling is so easy and accessible.
Absolutely. I think what's detrimental, especially speaking about illegal gambling, is often minors are the ones that are exposed to it, because I was listening to Mr. Cedric from the Mpumalanga Economic Regulator speaking about the machines that are found in the tuck shops, and it's mostly learners that are under the age of 18 that are exposed to those machines. It's similar trends that we are also identifying on our side when we do our Taking Risk Wiser Schools program, which is an awareness program aimed at educating learners that underage gambling is actually illegal gambling and how they can actually seek help or identify these forms of gambling.
Yeah, and in that context, actually the worst thing that can happen to these children is for them to win.
Yes, and they definitely do. And for them, it seems like a minor thing, it doesn't seem detrimental. They don't know better. And if you have 2 rands and then you go and put it in the machine and you get 20 rands, they tell you things like, I bought a quarter and I ate. So for them, they definitely see nothing wrong. And that's building up to, problematic behaviors, particularly problem gambling, because it happens over time, over a longer duration of time. And at that stage where they are 13 to 16, their brain is still in a development phase where they are releasing more brain chemicals compared to an adult, and they are at a very high risk to become addicted.
So when we talk about illegal gambling, of course, underage gambling is one form, but what other forms does that take?
There are other forms. I think a lot of South Africans could agree that they've seen, some gambling happening by our taxi ranks. There are other forms where you find community members sitting in corners playing cards and dice. We've also have reports of people playing casino games online, which is illegal in South Africa. Online gambling is illegal. And there's also, various forms that people are exposed to in the online space.
And yet, on your banking app, it's very easy to take part in gambling.
Yes, but as of my knowledge, it's easy to move and transfer money with online betting, which is licensed in South Africa.
Right.
I'm not sure how the transaction actually occur with online illegal gambling.
So the statistics are interesting, right? Because the numbers increase in terms of the number of people who are spending vast amounts of their income on gambling every month. It
Absolutely.
Increases as you go into the lower income earners.
Yes, it definitely does. And interestingly, according to our statistics, the most people that are seeking treatment from the National Responsible Gambling Program are employed, and they are using gambling as a secondary means of, getting more money or as a side income, compared to people who are unemployed and seeking treatment. So this just shows that there's a disjuncture in between. We're not sure if the unemployment is actually driving, or people that are actually unemployed are not really seeking treatment. We can't really put our finger on that. But we are seeing that a lot of people that are actually employed are seeking more treatment, being affected by problem gambling, because they use gambling to try and make secondary income.
So the number we have here for South Africans placing bets is R1 trillion, more than R1 trillion spent on betting every year, and the vast amount of that is spent on sports betting. How does that figure compare to the rest of the world?
It was a shocking figure, I won't lie, for our last financial year. So it's not yearly, but this past financial year report of 23-24 was showing that staggering number of 1.1 trillion being wagered into gambling. And out of that, we actually saw 2,662 people that actually came over to the foundation to seek treatment. And now that's a very huge disjuncture, to show that a lot of people perhaps are not aware, of the risks associated with gambling. Do they understand what they're getting into when they are gambling? And another disjuncture with that number is it doesn't cater for the illegal forms of gambling. They are not accounted for because there's no record of it, and we can't really have any data. We can't really track behavioral insights that are related to illegal forms of gambling. So yeah, I think in terms of comparing ourselves to international counterparts, we did go, an extra mile as South Africans when it comes to, the money that was wagered. It was really quite shocking. And I think about 80%, if I'm not mistaken, of it comes from online betting, which could be driven by various factors. Like I mentioned earlier, it could be the unemployment, but we're not sure why people that are unemployed are not seeking treatment. But also we need to consider the fact that there's easy access with online betting. When a person gambles at a physical establishment, that physical establishment would close down at a certain time and they will be forced to go home. But with online betting, you have your phone next to you, similar to how you access social media 24/7. You can easily just take your phone, do a bank transfer from your banking app to your betting app, and start betting. And that's what then puts people at a higher risk if they don't gamble responsibly of becoming addicted to gambling.
Yeah. And the point about a gambling addiction is that I suppose, and again, once you win, and especially if you win big, I suppose it becomes more and more dangerous because you try to chase that high. It's almost sort of related to drug use, isn't it? You're chasing that high of a big win.
It's not necessarily the winning big, it's actually the behavior. So gambling can easily be understood through understanding how the brain actually functions when you're gambling. Hence, there's the age restriction, similar to alcohol consumption, similar to cigarette smoking. There is an age restriction because of what the chemicals do to your brain. A gambling, behavior follows a similar cycle. It releases chemicals in your brain that you actually would get addicted to. They call them the feel-good chemicals, your dopamine, your serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphin. And the more you release those chemicals consistently, over time, you would become addicted to gambling. That's why they would say, like, pick your poison. Those similar chemicals are being released when you go to the gym. However, because of the response of your health when you are going to the gym, that becomes better for you. But with gambling, it's a similar cycle to gaming as well. People who are constantly sitting and gaming, people who are constantly, consuming alcohol get addicted. And, that's when it starts becoming problematic. It's not necessarily the winning or the losing. It's the chemicals that are being released and hence the age restriction. Because especially for children, between the ages that I mentioned earlier, their development of the brain is actually, at very high risk because it's still sensitive to those chemicals. And then the addiction actually occurs there. And you start seeing someone entering the gambling industry and start gambling legally by the age of 18 and they are presenting with signs of problem gambling by 22. It doesn't happen overnight. It definitely does start from, gambling underage and it builds up over time because it's a behavioral, addiction.
I mean, it sounds, just from all of the dangers that you've described, Tumelo, that we need a whole lot more regulation than we currently have in South Africa.
We definitely do, especially with curbing illegal gambling. And I say this because with the legal forms, there are deposit limits that people could use. There are forms of intervention that are mentioned there, like self-exclusion. You can exclude yourself and ban yourself. But with illegal forms of gambling, there's no means of intervention and there's no ability of tracking your behavior over time as you would with legal platforms. So that's when it becomes detrimental because you also are not reached for outreach programs because from the Advocacy Communications Department, we do visit, our licensed operators to educate punters that are on site about responsible gambling and, how to gamble in a manner that would not affect them. And should you be gambling illegally, we wouldn't be able to reach you because, it wouldn't be safe for us to visit illegal gambling sites to try and intervene, as you can imagine.
Right. And of course, it goes without saying that gambling is not a reliable source of income. And as the stress of trying to sort of win back the things that you've lost, the money that you've lost, it can lead to some serious mental health challenges.
It definitely could. So gambling was licensed to become a form of entertainment in South Africa. There are other socio-economic factors that are driving people to gamble, but everyone literally understands gambling as a way of making money. It could also stem from our advertising and, the messaging and how it's driving people, keeping them, and a sense of hopefulness to change their lives and all the messaging that is driving people to actually participate in gambling. And we've also seen that people actually start seeking treatment when they are facing the detrimental issues, when their families start falling apart, when their finances are now not in order. Also driven by the stigma associated with gambling, because no one wants to come out and say, I actually gamble. It sounds more palatable to say, no, I bet, I'm not a gambler, which I don't really understand why our society does that. But yeah, so those are the things that could hinder, people seeking treatment when they start becoming affected. And there's also cognitive dissonance, where when someone starts feeling being affected and they start seeing that their gambling habits are affecting their lives, they start telling themselves that, no, I'm fine, and it contradicts what they are going through. Their beliefs are contradicting what they are going through. And then it then goes unchecked and it becomes worse over time because they are now driven by the craving. So you start craving the gambling when you're becoming, a problem gambler before you actually move to the disordered gambling stage that can be diagnosed by a clinician. And those are some of the issues that actually occur. Families get broken apart due to gambling.
Tumelo, it's not just about gambling the money I have, right? It's also about putting myself into debt so that I can continue.
Absolutely. But I like dwelling onto the psychological impact because that's where everything begins. The financial aspect is what we can see with the naked eye, and it's heavily associated with problem gambling. And people often forget the psychological aspect where you start chasing losses, you start trying to put in larger amounts to get more money, the beliefs that happen, the conflict internally that you start facing. And as NRGP, unfortunately, we cannot also, turn people away when they are affected by illegal gambling because we are confined by the Mental Health Care Act. We cannot refuse patients that are presenting with problem gambling from seeking treatment that are affected by illegal gambling. Also because, in South Africa, we have licensed operators that contribute to the NRGP for us to be able to offer our services for free.
Right.